The sound of a stock exchange floor is often described as a roar, but in Thomas William Lawson's 1907 novel, Friday the 13th, it sounds more like a battlefield. We open in the middle of a violent market panic on Wall Street. The atmosphere is one of pure, unadulterated chaos. Our narrator, Jim Randolph, is an ethical banker who has spent his life trying to navigate the complexities of finance with a sense of decency. But as he watches the panic unfold, he sees his lifelong friend, Bob Brownley, transforming into someone he barely recognizes. Bob isn't just trading anymore, he's acting with a manic, destructive energy, aggressively selling off stocks in a way that seems designed to trigger a total market collapse. To understand how Bob Brownley became this vengeful force of nature, we have to go back years, before the bitterness took hold. At that time, Bob was a different man. Jovial, perhaps a bit too optimistic, but fundamentally good. His life changed when he met Beulah Sands. Beulah was a beautiful woman from the South, driven by a desperate, singular mission to recover her family's lost fortune. She wasn't just a socialite, she was a woman with a high-stakes appetite for risk. Bob and Jim became her allies, helping her navigate the treacherous waters of high-stakes stock trading. As they dove deeper into the market, Bob's personality began to shift. He transitioned from a man enjoying the game to a man possessed by Beulah's cause. He became almost priest-like in his devotion to her success. This brings us to the first great tragedy of the novel, the battle for the sugar stocks. There was a ruthless speculator in the market named Barry Conant, a man who represented the predatory side of finance. Conant launched a massive coordinated selling campaign intended to crush the sugar stocks and wipe out anyone holding them. Despite Bob's desperate frantic resistance, the market gave way. The collapse was total. The group was financially ruined, and Beulah was left with only a tiny fraction of what she had once possessed. In the aftermath, while Bob retreated to Virginia to lick his wounds and nurse his shame, Beulah showed a strength that was almost painful to witness. She refused to blame anyone else, insisting on bearing her share of the losses to maintain her integrity, even as her world crumbled. Years pass, and Bob Brownley returns to New York. But the man who returns is not the one who left. He is hardened, cold, and fueled by a deep-seated need for vengeance. He and Beulah have finally found each other again, and they have consummated their love, but there is no joy in it. Their connection feels hollow because Bob has discovered a terrifying truth about the world he lives in. He realizes that the market isn't actually driven by economic reality or the value of companies. Instead, it is controlled by something he calls the system. The system is a corrupt, invisible cabal of speculators who manipulate prices through psychological warfare. They don't care about the companies they trade, they only care about the movement of the price, which they manufacture through sheer force of will and credit. Bob becomes obsessed with destroying this machine. He decides that if he cannot beat the system by playing by its rules, he will use its own weapons to poison it. He waits for the perfect moment, and that moment arrives on Friday the 13th. In the novel, Lawson uses the superstition of the date, the idea that it is inherently unlucky, as a psychological trigger. Bob executes a masterstroke of market manipulation. He aggressively shorts the sugar stock, driving the price into a terrifying freefall. As the market panics and the systemic failures begin to ripple through the exchange, Bob performs a sudden, violent reversal. Just as the stock hits its absolute lowest point, he turns around and buys massive amounts of shares. He has effectively poisoned the system's plan, turning their own momentum against them and netting himself millions of dollars. But this victory is entirely Pyrrhic. Bob has won the war, but he has lost his soul in the process. The fallout from the crash is devastating for those caught in the crossfire. Beulah's father, unable to cope with the total financial ruin brought on by the chaos, descends into madness and commits murder, suicide. The shock of this violence and the loss of her family's dignity causes Beulah to suffer a total psychological collapse. She doesn't just become sad, she regresses. She loses her memory and her sense of self, falling into a permanent, infantile state of amnesia. Bob is left in a gilded cage. He marries the shell of the woman he once loved, building a lavish mansion that serves as a shrine to her lost identity. He becomes a financial titan, amassing hundreds of millions through increasingly violent and erratic market raids. He lives in a state of spiritual purgatory, oscillating between moments of brilliant, predatory trading and bouts of drunken despair. He becomes the very thing he once hated, a man who lives only to unjoint the spine of the stock exchange. The tension builds toward a global financial panic that threatens to pull the entire world economy under. In a moment of dramatic defiance, Bob interrupts a meeting of the governing committee. He stands before the most powerful men in finance and delivers a scathing indictment of the system. He exposes their secret, how they use unlimited, manufactured credit to create chips, essentially fake value, to plunder the masses. No, Bob isn't there to reform the system. He's there to destroy it. In a final, chaotic act of financial warfare, he provides a $1 billion blank check to his former rival, Barry Conant. He tells Conant to buy 10 million shares at any price, essentially throwing a stick into a hornet's nest to trigger an unprecedented trading battle that will tear the market apart. In the midst of this madness, Bob receives a piece of news that stops his heart. Beulah has miraculously regained her sanity. In a frantic, high-speed race through the streets of Manhattan, Bob rushes to her office, hoping for a chance at redemption, a chance to finally be the man he was before the market took him. But he is too late. He reaches her only to find that she has died. Some say from sheer exhaustion, others say from a broken heart. Overwhelmed by the weight of his life's work and the sudden, devastating loss of the only thing that kept him anchored, Bob collapses and dies right beside her. The novel ends on a chilling note. As Bob and Beulah lie dead, the news breaks of a global economic collapse. A prominent millionaire commits suicide. The predatory machinery of Wall Street has finished its work, consuming both its victims and its most powerful combatants. When we look back at the story, it's clear that Lawson wasn't just writing a financial thriller. He was writing a tragedy about the nature of modern life. The central metaphor of the book is the system. It's portrayed not as a tool for commerce, but as a predatory, self-perpetuating machine that thrives on the destruction of individuals. In Lawson's view, the market isn't a place where value is discovered, it's a place where value is manufactured and then harvested from the unwary. There is a profound irony in Bob Brownley's character arc. He begins as a man who wants to protect Beulah and her family's legacy, but in his pursuit of vengeance against a corrupt system, he adopts the very cruelty that the system uses. To fight the monster, he has to become a monster. He achieves astronomical wealth, but it is a hollow, spiritual poverty. He spends his final years as a titan of industry, yet he is essentially a ghost, living in a mansion that is more a tomb than a home. We also see this reflected in Beulah's psychological collapse. Her regression into an infantile state is a powerful, if extreme, metaphor for how the volatility of the market can strip a person of their dignity and their very identity. When the structures we rely on, the social and economic foundations of our lives, are revealed to be illusions or tools of manipulation, the human psyche struggles to hold itself together. The novel suggests that the cost of ambition and revenge is often much higher than the rewards. Bob wanted to break the machine, but the machine was designed to absorb and use the energy of those who try to break it. Even his final, grand gesture, the $1 billion blank check, wasn't an act of justice, it was just more chaos, more fuel for the fire. Ultimately, Friday the 13th is a story about the limits of individual agency in the face of massive impersonal forces. Bob Brownley was one of the most powerful men in the world, a man who could move markets with a single word, yet he was ultimately powerless to save the woman he loved or to stop the machine he helped to fuel. The book leaves us with the unsettling idea that the machinery of capitalism is a juggernaut that doesn't care who it crushes, whether they are the innocent victims on the outside or the predatory giants on the inside.